Good evening, everyone. Good evening. It is 6:00 p.m., Tuesday, April 26, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting of the Peoria City Council to order. I'd also like to welcome everyone in our City Council chambers, as well as Brady Johnson and our listening audience at WCBU. I'd like to welcome the audience watching via cable channel 22. Clerk, our council mics are open. Please call the roll.
Mayor Ali,
Present.
Councilmember Allen, Councilmember Sear, Councilmember Grayup,
Here.
Councilmember Jackson,
Here.
Councilmember Jensen, Councilmember Kelly,
Here.
Councilmember Euler,
Here.
Councilmember Riggenbach,
Here.
Councilmember Ruckriegel, and Councilmember Velpula.
Present.
We have a quorum present, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Please join me and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk.
We have two proclamations.
First proclamation recognizes Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Whereas Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, AAPI Heritage Month, is an annual celebration that recognizes the historical and cultural contributions of individuals and groups of Asian and Pacific Islander descent to the United States. And whereas AAPI includes cultures from the entire Asian continent and the Pacific islands of Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. AAPI people are the fastest growing population in the United States and make up approximately 7% of the total population. Whereas in 1979, Representative Frank Horton of New York proposed Asian Pacific Heritage Week, and after the House and Senate passed the resolution, it was signed into law by President Jimmy Carter. In 1992, it was expanded to a month-long celebration to be held in May as Asian Pacific Heritage Month. In 2009, it was renamed to AAPI Heritage Month. Whereas May was identified for AAPI Heritage Month because it commemorates the immigration of the first Japanese people to the United States on May 7, 1843, and also acknowledges Golden Spike Day on May 10, 1869, marking the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad built with momentous contributions of Asian Pacific Americans. Now, therefore, I, Rita Ali, Mayor of the City of Peoria, do hereby recognize May as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month in Peoria, Illinois. Our next proclamation recognizes Arbor Day, and I'd like to ask Assistant Director Cy Maroon and Dave Johnson with the Southwest Kiwanis to come forth. Whereas in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. Whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. Whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. Whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore, I, Rita Ali, Mayor of the City of Peoria, do hereby proclaim April 29th, 2022 as Arbor Day in Peoria, Illinois.
Council for recognizing Arbor Day, which is an annual event for us. I don't think it could be said any better than what was in the proclamation and all the benefits that we get from trees and from plant life. It's pretty amazing. So really there's not a whole lot more to say about that. That was done well. What I would like to say, though, is Arbor Day is a big event for us. We are also recognized as a Tree City USA. That in itself takes quite a bit of criteria to meet the demands to become a Tree City USA, which we are. And let me just give you the magnitude of what we deal with. To qualify, one of the qualifications are you have to own, so to speak, or be in the right-of-way over 20,000 trees, or 20,000 is actually the number. In the city of Peoria, we have 22,000 trees. Now, obviously, that's a large number to think that we would maintain, but we do maintain every bit of what we need to maintain within that region. So that's just one more point I wanted to make about Arbor Day is a tremendous thing for us. Dave Johnson is here from the South-West Kiwanis. We have a partnership with him and with the Kiwanis as well as the Park District. Every year they donate a tree to us and we find a place to plant it. In the last handful of years we've been planting trees down at the riverfront, replacing some of the dead trees that have been going away from us. So I'm going to step aside and let Dave have a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Si. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. This year will be the 37th year that we've planted a tree in the community. Okay. We've, in addition to the 37 trees from Arbor Day, our club, in cooperation with the state, other community agencies, and our membership, have donated donated and distributed over 31,000 trees in the area. Wow. So this is something we take very seriously. Like I said, sometimes we're just replacing trees that didn't make it. Otherwise, we've planted new locations. And I would definitely like to thank Si for his assistance in doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, Director.
Just a couple of reminders. This Friday, the 29th, we are doing a tree planting at Constitution Gardens at 10 a.m. Everyone's invited. The public's welcome to come as well. And then on Saturday, this weekend, the 30th, we're doing our annual mulch giveaway. These are recycled trees that we've actually accumulated over the years from windstorms, trees that are dying off and of that nature. So that is going to be this Saturday from 8 to 1 at the Drees Lane facility at 3505 Drees Lane, at the Public Works facility, 3505 Drees Lane. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk.
We are at the minutes.
Councilman Euler.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I move to approve the minutes of the Joint City Council and Town Board meeting held on April 12th, 2022, as printed.
Seconded by Councilman Sear. Any comments or questions? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at the town portion of the agenda. 22-122 is a public hearing regarding the 2022-2023 budget for the town of the City of Peoria, and we need a motion to open the public hearing.
Can I get a motion to open? Opened by Councilman Kelly, seconded by Councilwoman Jackson. I think we need to vote on this. Okay. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Do we have anyone who would like to speak regarding the 2022-2023 budget for the town of the City of Peoria? Is there anyone present who would like to speak regarding the 2022-2023 budget for the town of the City of Peoria? Okay. And then last call, is there anyone that would like to speak to the 2022-2023 budget for the town of the City of Peoria? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing, moved by Councilman Ruckriegel, seconded by by Trustee Ruckriegel, seconded by Trustee Allen. Any comments or questions? If not, trustees, please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-123 is an annual report draft from April 1, 2021 through March 31, 2022, with a request to receive and file.
Can I get a motion from the trustees, moved by Councilmember Graham, seconded by Councilmember Riggenbach? Excuse me, I got to get the language right. This is trustees. We're moving from council people to trustees during this segment. So Trustee Riggenbach. Any comments or questions? Trustee Sear? Light not, okay.
Nope.
It was blinking. Okay. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-124 is a resolution consenting to the employment of Mesher, Reinhardt, and Redlingschafer, P.C. as town attorneys with request to approve.
Okay. Trustees, is there a motion moved by Trustee Graham, seconded by Trustee Allen? Any comments or questions? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-125 is a resolution for the town of the City of Peoria authorizing township officials to continue a loss control policy with TORMA and to enter into a contract of insurance with request to approve.
Is there a motion moved by Trustee Graham, seconded by Trustee Valpola? Any other questions, comments? Trustee Graham?
No comments per se. A lot of these are routine items, and I've discussed most all of these with all the trustees. TOI RMA comes into play when we need to cover something that would involve our insurance. So it's very vital that we continue to have that loss control policy with them. So that's why it's important that we approve this tonight.
Okay, good. It's been moved and seconded. If there's no other comments or questions, please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-126 is a resolution authorizing the town of the City of Peoria to enter into a payroll services agreement with ADP LLC with request to approve.
Is there a motion to approve? Moved by trustee Kelly, seconded by trustee Euler. Trustee Graham?
Madam Chair, I move to approve as outlined.
We've already got a motion to approve and seconded. Your light was on, so I...
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-127 is a resolution authorizing the town of the City of Peoria to enter into an agreement with the Heartland Clinic with request to approve and to receive and file the 2021 statistical report.
Is there a motion to receive and file? Moved by trustee Allen, seconded by trustee Reckriegel. There's no questions or comments. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-128 is a resolution authorizing the town of the City of Peoria to make a donation to the Center for Prevention of Abuse with request to approve and to receive and file the 2021 report.
Can I get a motion? Moved by trustee Jackson, seconded by trustee Graham. Trustee Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just perhaps for general knowledge, could we hear from the supervisor
Sure.
about how it is that we make, or that the township makes donations to these charities?
Supervisor Larry? Thank you.
All right, good evening. For those who are aware or unaware, every year the township donates money to local organizations and agencies to further extend our reach in helping the community. This year we chose the Heartland Health Services because it covers, it extends our reach with as far as health services to the community. Center for Prevention of Abuse, the name of the organization in itself, pretty much is the reason for, pretty much, I guess the best way to say it is, its name speaks for itself. And then this year I'm going to step ahead of myself. We added in the Friendship House and the Tri-County Urban League. The reason for that being is recently, in this past year, if anyone is, I'm pretty sure all of you are all aware of all of the unfortunate murders that happened, and a lot of it was with young adults and young children. So I thought it was very important that we reach out to these entities that help extend our reach to these young adults and young children that can be more, I guess, disadvantaged to these acts of violence. Just to kind of give you, a little bit more information as to why we chose the Tri-County Urban League and the Friendship Houses. Both agencies provides advocacy, coaching, education, and support to residents within the community. The Friendship House provides mentorship programs, after-school programs, and a food pantry for those who may need food. The Tri-County Urban League provides GED classes, job training, after-school tutoring. You will see more information about the TSTM program, which stands for Tomorrow's Scientists, Technicians, and Managers. This program encourages disadvantaged youth to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and business. They also provide hands-on workforce training, career mentoring, computer lab access. And I do want to make mention of two particular programs that they also provide. Male Mentor Monday. I'm not sure if any of you are aware. Some of you may or may not be. I think it is a stupendous, absolute phenomenal program. This program is for outreach and mentoring of young boys and young men in the community that do not have the guidance that some of us may be privy to. Also, I want to make mention to Teens to Queens and the GLOW group. The GLOW group stands for Girls Light Our Way. Teens to Queen. Those programs are to provide mentorship for young ladies and to providing them a great pathway or a better pathway that they may not have access to. So I think that it's very important that the township is also being very active and proactive and reaching out and pouring into those agencies and communities that support our young adults and our children. And as far as the budget goes, we did not increase the budget. The amount of money that we had previously given into the community, that amount stayed the same. We just changed the amount of funding appropriated to those entities.
Thank you, Madam Supervisor. It was very well done. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Sure, thank you. Velpula?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to recuse myself from voting because I serve on the Board of Directors for Center for Prevention of Abuse. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve and to receive and file 2021 report. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes with one abstention. Velpula. Madam Clerk?
22-129 is a resolution authorizing the town of the city of Peoria to make a donation to Friendship House of Christian Service with request to approve and to receive and file the letter included with the resolution.
Is there a motion? Trustee Regal, seconded by Trustee Allen. Any other comments? Questions? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-130 is a resolution authorizing the town of the city of Peoria to make a donation to Tri-County Urban League with request to approve and to receive and file the letter included with the resolution.
Moved by Trustee Velpula, seconded by Trustee Kelly. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-131 is the annual town budget and appropriation ordinance for 2022-2023 with request to adopt.
Madam
Trustee Graham?
Chair, we're open for any questions in reference to this budget. We have our township officials here tonight. If there are any questions, this would be the time to pose them. Otherwise, I'm going to move to approve as outlined.
Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Jackson. Any questions? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes with one abstention. We changed that. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-132 is a resolution consenting to the employment of Clifton Larson Allen LLP as outside independent auditors with request to approve.
Madam Chair, I move to approve as outlined.
Seconded by Trustee Velpula. Any questions, comments? Please cast your ballots. Trustee. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-133 is a resolution designating individuals to prepare the budget and appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2023-2024 with request to approve.
Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Trustee Graham, seconded by Trustee Euler. Any questions, comments? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, the last town item.
22-134 is a resolution designating the time, place, and date of the 2023 annual town meeting with request to approve.
Trustee Graham?
Yes, and gosh, it's hard to think about 23 already, but we have to set this date ahead of time.
Okay, seconded by Trustee Allen. Any other comments, questions? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, that completes all of our town items. Madam Clerk?
We are at the consent agenda. 22-135 is a communication with request to approve the declaration of local state of emergency. 22-136 is a communication with a request to approve a purchase with Rarig Pacific Company in an amount not to exceed $44,624 for 702 new 95-gallon garbage carts for replacement in inventory. 22-137 is a communication with a request to approve a professional services agreement with Corbin Design for an amount not to exceed $40,000 for the downtown wayfinding project. 22-148 is a communication with a request to approve and authorize the execution of a contract with Resource Management Associates in the amount of $37,560 to administer the fire captain promotional examination. 22-138 is a communication with a request to concur with a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance approving a special use in a Class R3 single-family residential district for a short-term rental for the property located at 5620 Northwestern Avenue. 22-139 is a communication with a request to concur with recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance approving a special use in a Class RE estate residential district for a short-term rental for the property located at 7725 North Orchard Road. And 22-140 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Greater Peoria Mass Transit District Board of Trustees with request to concur of Don Knox. And that concludes our consent agenda.
Thank you. Are there any items to remove from consent? Can I get a motion to approve consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Ruckriegel, seconded by Councilmember Seer. Any other questions or comments? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at regular business. 22-141 is a communication from the city manager with a request to approve an intergovernmental agreement establishing the Public Health Equity Fund between the City of Peoria, Peoria County, and the Peoria County Board of Health.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The item that you have in front of you this evening is for the establishment of a public health equity fund with the County of Peoria. It would be managed by the County Board of Health, the City County Board of Health. The intent behind this, as we discussed when we put the budget together and we talked about the use of the American Rescue Plan funds, was that we would utilize a portion of those funds to focus on the social determinants of health. To really highlight what those social determinants of health are in the council communication, there's a slide deck that was put together by Monica Hendrickson to just kind of discuss in general terms what we're talking about. Ultimately, there's social determinants of health aren't just about access to health care. It's also about the physical environment in which we live in and that our community lives in. It's also about economic stability. It's also about neighborhood and the built environment, and then social in the community context. So the intent behind this is really to focus on the social side, not necessarily access to health care, but really focusing on the built environment from the point of view of trying to say we need to improve our public health outcomes. So this is really complementary with what we've been doing with the American Rescue Plan as we've been trying to put money towards neighborhood revitalization, focusing on not only homeowners in our neighborhoods, but renters in our neighborhoods. And this is a way that we can do that with a public health lens and focusing this effort. The county's executive committee took this up today and adopted it unanimously, and it will go to the county board on their meeting the second Tuesday in May. God, it's hard to believe I forgot when they meet, but it's the second Tuesday or second Thursday in May that they'll be bringing us. See, I did forget, Councilman Regenbach. But I'd be happy to answer any questions pertaining to this item. Staff wholeheartedly supports this initiative and feels this is a very good use of the American Rescue Plan funds.
Mr. Manager, these funds were already approved in the budget that we had approved last year.
That is correct.
So this is actually the carrying out the mission.
Exactly. Just like we have been bringing forward those agenda items for how we're spending American Rescue Plan dollars, whether it's through the Community Development Department or Economic Development, this is that intergovernmental agreement that memorializes how we'll spend these dollars and in that effort.
Okay. Questions for the manager? Councilmember Jensen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And although I support the general idea of us putting some of the rescue plan money into public health and focusing on the areas where it's really needed, I guess just from reading the material that we were given, it just all seems pretty general and kind of vague. I don't think the director of the health department's here, but I don't know if you can give specific programs that you think this will include.
At this point in time, we don't have specific programs. One of the items that we're looking to do is to work with the Racial Justice and Equity Commission that has been adopted by the city and the county. Right now, the RJE committee has broken out into their subcommittees. They have 8 different subcommittees. One is focused on public health. They're looking at what are the key metrics that we should be looking at from an equity standpoint, and then they're going to start building programs to address those inequities that they see in our community. From this perspective, though, I think the health department is looking at this saying many of the items that are affecting health outcomes in our community relate to housing, they relate to the built environment, they relate to lack of jobs. So they want to look at how they can take some of this funding and develop programming around those specific areas and move that forward with the input from the RJE committee over the next year and a half with that.
I guess then is the plan that we'll get report backs on what the specific programs are?
Yes.
It just makes me a little uneasy approving $600,000, which is a lot of money, not knowing specifically what it's going to be used for or examples of types of programs. But I do support public health as the daughter of a public health nurse, and I understand the concept. It just makes me a little uneasy that we don't know exactly where the money's going to go and what it exactly is going to do.
Yeah, I think it gives them some parameters of what they have to work with in putting together the various programs and then continue to get input. But we will certainly have them circle back. And perhaps Monica
On a regular basis, we'll be happy to do that.
Presentation, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is exciting. I'm glad to see this collaboration between both the city of Peoria and the county as well too. And so, just for clarification, so it sounds like the RJE committee will be running point as far as deciding on what programs are going to be funded to execute this initiative?
They're going to certainly help inform the direction of where the spending would be driven, and that's the intent behind it. It so happens that one of the vice chairs of that committee is also the chair of the Board of Health, I believe. So that helps to drive that effort as well. So and align those efforts they're going to be moving forward.
And I would add, Councilman Allen, that there's a health equity group that Unity Point, OSF, the School of Medicine, and some other, I think NAACP and some other entities are involved in, and they are doing some interfacing with the RJE health committee. So I'm sure that they are going to weigh in to the types of programs that may be involved with this funding as well.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you. $1.2 million each year is very exciting. Thank you.
Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Manager, I've got a couple questions. As I look through this, I see things like economic development, neighborhoods, infrastructure, and then dollar amounts allocated to those. Is the health department going to be spending that money?
Not directly. The health department may be funding programs using these dollars to try and address the social determinants of health. So they may be working with community-based agencies or with the city staff, the city community development staff, or with the Workforce Alliance as we look at jobs that are kind of managed through the Illinois Central College efforts there, in order to try and fund programming to address these specific issues, and looking at that scope of what public health or the social determinants are, whether that's the economic issues, whether that's the built environment, or whether that's some of the social issues that we may be seeing.
I don't know, it just seems a little confusing to me. We have a mission in this government here to take care of economic development. That's not their mission. I think they do their mission very, very well. But I don't understand so it just seems to me like this sounds good, but I don't know how they have this expertise.
Well, I think the issue for the health department is that more than 60% of what you would consider to be public health related issues fall back on these areas of social determinants. What they're saying is that where you live and what kind of job you have has an effect on your health. And those are areas that traditionally health departments haven't focused on, but they have an impact. When our county health rankings come out, and we look at where we rank from all 102 counties in Illinois, I can tell you that we rank near the top for access to health care. But we rank near the bottom when it comes to issues such as housing and when it comes to issues such as economic opportunity for residents in Peoria. And that draws down our county health rankings in terms of our ability to say that we're providing good health outcomes for this community. And then when that report comes out, that's a lens that people look at, and they'll look at Peoria and they'll say that there are issues that we're seeing in Peoria that we're not addressing and that we need to be focusing on.
I don't really disagree with anything you just said. We're eating up my time here, okay? I'm just saying they don't have the expertise. We have the expertise. I don't know that this transfer is a very good idea. I do have another question as well, Mr. Manager, and perhaps my memory is incorrect. When we first had the 4-year the COVID money that was going to come in and to be spent over 4 years. Violence prevention was, I believe, slated for $375,000 a year. We asked you to front load that. I didn't like how you front loaded it, but okay. You front loaded the money by $1 million, and you put every penny of it into violence prevention. Okay. Now, I thought that was for the first year, but I see here, or not here, that's every year. We went from $375,000 a year for 4 years to $1,350,000 or 25?
1.3 million
1.325 every year.
for 2 years.
Well, I thought it was for 1 year. Is it for 2 years or is it for 4?
we adopted a biennial budget that approved spending for 2022 and 2023. So what you have officially voted on is for 2 years of that spending.
So we did vote on this.
Well, this is a
Better than $1 million.
separate, this doesn't come out of the violence prevention funding. This comes out of a separate $600,000 that we presented to you in the report backs where we were talking about how we would recommend that we would spend these dollars. And we recommended $600,000 to be matched by the county putting up $600,000 to focus on these issues. And I can tell you that what this really is going to do, it's going to leverage county dollars to help city residents, because most of this work and most of the poor health outcomes in this county occur in the area of the city that are in our qualified census tracts. So areas south of McClure.
Yes, I understand that. My question was, are we going to, is violence reduction, it moved from 375 a year to $1.3 million, so almost fourfold increase in the first year. But I see here it's also in the second year, and perhaps we voted on that and I missed it. And is this going to go on for the third and fourth year? What happened to the value of violence prevention, which I'm in favor of, going from 375 to quadruple, and then quadruple again in 2023? And is this going to, I mean, and at the time when you and I spoke.
We haven't decided on the next set of money. We just decided on the first 2 years. And so we allocated the $600,000. I thought it was each year for 2 years. We allocated 1.3 for violence prevention each year for just those 2 years. That other remaining funding, we still have to decide how we're going to spend that funding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Manager.
Councilmember Velpula?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I would like to thank the manager and his staff, the council, the mayor, the county for coming forward for this initiative. I really love this initiative. But again, I have to echo the thoughts of Councilwoman Jensen as well as Councilman Kelly. So if you look at the presentation that is given, it includes infrastructure, neighborhoods, economic development, violence reduction. So if you kind of tag it to one umbrella, everything comes under the social determinants of health. These are some of the factors that are key determinants of health. So the idea of having the health equity managed by the Peoria County is fantastic. I have no doubt about that. But going back to everything listed here, we are actually, the health equity that is planned would be falling back or spilling over into a lot of things the other communities has been doing, other spending events are doing. That's one. And second thing I also have is, to add to Councilman Kelly's argument, he's right in saying that. I mean, health equity, Mr. Manager said that health equity and it is managed by the county, but again, it all reflects into, quality of education, employment, and healthy housing, a lot of these things. And the second part I have a question is about, we have a Racial Justice Equity Committee, subcommittee, which is going to look into it. It's fantastic. But again, I would really love to see the stakeholders, such as the hospitals, coming into it. The second part is, let's say today we have, in a couple minutes earlier, we learned about Heartland Health. They are serving like 21,000 underprivileged people, and next in line falls the Community Revitalization Plan. So we have a lot of things that could address the determinants of health. So maybe we could pick up a niche and then put our weight behind it. To add to Councilwoman Jensen's comment, it's pretty vague. So I would really, bring all the stakeholders together to see where we are lacking. And the reason why I wanted to do this is we need data to really see what we have done, where the money goes, what have we achieved. We're going to spend like $1.2 million every year pairing with the county. So I think that, it's just, I would like to learn the council's thought on that, but I really feel that we need these stakeholders coming and kind of having an oversight into where we really wanted to do, especially when it comes to the health. Thank you.
In response, I think that I wholeheartedly agree with you that we want to see the data informing these dollars. One of the challenges that we have with this is that we've been given a lot of money and what amounts to a really short time to spend these dollars. So part of what we're doing is trying to put a portion of this with the health department to say, now go work. If you had $1.2 million, not encumbered by how you would normally spend the money that you get on a regular and recurring basis, how would you help to change what we're doing in our community today? Same thing with the violence prevention funds that we're looking at. What can we do differently than we're doing today, and how can we change the outcomes? That's what we need. So some of this is somewhat experimental for us in terms of how we're going to be putting these dollars to use to try and improve health outcomes, public safety outcomes, the built environment in our community in a different way, in a different manner. So, and I think we can certainly pull in the hospitals and the other stakeholders as we continue to have that conversation.
Thank you.
I think, Mr. Manager, it would be helpful for the council to see the data on health equity. I know I was at a meeting yesterday morning when Dr. Keith Knapp from Unity Point began to share some, I think you were there too, Dr. Velpula, on health equity and some of the issues, some of the statistics, and they were really glaring for Peoria. So knowing those statistics in the area of health equity and those disparities, I think will help us to support what we've already really voted on, but I think people want to see the plan as to how those dollars are going to be spent. So perhaps we could have a presentation coming up, perhaps from Monica or someone associated with this agreement. Any other, Councilmember Graham?
Mayor Lee, I think you said it very well. In other words, when the picture on the TV screen, to get a little better focus on it, we want you to come back and let us know.
Yep.
And that, I believe, is where we're all coming from, because, yes, these are large sums of money, but we want some focus on where it's going. And I hear the mayor and you saying that we'll get that feedback, and thank you very much.
Yes. So we have an item here. A request to approve the intergovernmental agreement. Councilmember Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Would it be appropriate to move to defer this item 2 weeks? Is that enough time to do that? Or?
No, because this is going to take several months in order to be able to put together the criteria and the programming. This is the first step. This is the intergovernmental agreement that establishes. You've already voted on approving putting the money towards this effort. What you have this evening is just simply the mechanism in order to allow us to work with the county to do that and to work with the health department to do that.
Councilmember Jensen?
I guess because we don't have a copy of the intergovernmental agreement, I don't think it's part of our...
It's attached.
It is? I was looking for it.
It is.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that was the actual agreement. Does it say in there that that we are obligating the city for $600,000 per year for 4 years, or is it just $600,000 this year?
It's for
Oh, yeah,
2
it does
years.
say in there. Okay.
It's each year for 2 years.
No, it says through 2025, 2023, 2024, and 2025. If you go to page 4. $5B, okay.
Okay, 3 years.
So what you're just asking us to do is approve this agreement, which is going to set up the fund, and then you're going to come back and give us, report back on
And-
what exactly the programs will be that the fund will
Absolutely.
pay for. Now, what if there's things in there that we're not, I mean, that we don't think,
Council has the right to say no, and we'll tell the health department no.
but do we if we've already given them the money?
Yes, because we're partners with them, and we're working with them on this effort. The city staff and the county staff have been working very closely on trying to figure out how best to align all of this funding that we have that's unprecedented in order to provide the best outcome for our communities. Right now, the health department is also working on violence prevention initiatives because violence is a public health issue, and they're working on that as well. So this is simply trying to establish the mechanism and the fund so that we can start to work through this. If there is the Racial Justice and Equity Commission, which we have established and we have put together, and the council has approved all the members of that committee to say, tell us where we have problems in our community, and then start to work on how we can fund changes in that and trying to develop solutions to those issues. This is the mechanism to make that happen, is to have this type of funding available for the public health component of that Racial Justice and Equity Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Rodrigo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think there have been some great questions that as we go into this. But I go back to, I think when we talked about this a while back, even maybe prior to our budgeting cycle. And as the RGE was coming into play, one of the things that I think we talked about around the council, as well as a lot of us in private, is making sure that we didn't create a commission that didn't have some funding behind it to be able to do the things that it could do. One of the other questions I remember asking City Manager Yerk was, at what points can we partner and leverage our dollars with the county dollars? And I think this is something that we're doing here as well. And I think it's also important for us to realize, and I know that you hear the fact that we want to be involved in the process, we want to get some information back. And right now, the committees are trying to decide which problems they tackle. And I don't think any of us are unaware that there are probably more problems and there are going to be dollars to be able to go for it. So they've got to prioritize where they're going to be putting their efforts. I think about some programs we've done in the past that have not been connected to these, where we've had some really good partnerships with the county to be able to try some different things. And therefore, I think that this is not only the right thing to do, we've talked about this for not only in the budgeting process, I remember this coming up, but in that first sort of conversations with the RGE. So with that, and so that we can make for sure that we also, I guess before I make the motion, I'll say one other thing is, we also have to realize that not everything that can be done is going to be done around this council. We've got to have partners in this city. And this allows for those partners to be able to pull all of those assets and tools. And because there's a lot of programs out there that don't come our way or that we can't do, but this allows those seed dollars to be able to blossom up. And so with that, I'll make the motion to approve as presented.
Seconded by Councilmember Allen. I just want to encourage everyone to kind of trust the mechanisms and structures that we've put in place, because a lot of those structures have expertise that we don't necessarily have around the council, especially in the area of health. And I know we are held accountable for the taxpayer money that's being spent. So we want to know the details, and we're going to know those details. We're going to know the baseline disparities that we're looking at. We're going to know the types of programs that are being proposed. We're going to have those kind of presentations, but I guess I don't want us to be too fearful of allowing the experts and the people who are really on the ground close to these issues to go ahead and begin to put some steps and activities and programs in place that are sure to have an impact on our community. With that, if there's no more questions or comments, I would ask you to cast your ballots, please. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
22-142 is a communication with a request to concur with a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to approve a resolution amending the comprehensive plan to include the East Bluff Housing Needs Assessment and the Community Revitalization Plan.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director Doolin is here to talk about the plan and the planning efforts that we're undertaking in the East Bluff.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Manager. I spoke to Councilman Riggenbach before the meeting, and I think he was going to kick it off with some comments, if that's okay.
Councilman Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm really pleased to have this plan before us tonight, and as I've been talking to people throughout the East Bluff over the weekend and in the last week, they're like, when did we do that? And just as a reminder, this process started in 2019. This was a pre-COVID endeavor that our Community Development Department, in conjunction with IDA, put forward. So there was an incredible amount of input from the public in this. We had a survey window of about 4 months. We had 163 surveys come back. We had 3 different public meetings. The first one at the community center in the East Bluff had over 40, about 45, 50 residents showed up. We had a joint meeting with the first district, the south side at the library, and there was about 20-ish people. And then we had a virtual meeting last year with also just short of 20 people there. So there was multiple opportunities to engage in this. And I would be remiss if I didn't say at that first meeting, Director Doolin and the team had the bright idea to encapsulate everybody's email and contact information, so they were included in all the communication going forward in this. This is a very thick and thorough report. I won't go into all the details, but I would just ask you all to take a look at page 79, which has the recommendations, because I think this is very telling. These are things that aren't going to surprise anybody, but I think the number one thing that we heard through many of these things and that we hear consistently as council members is the awareness of the existing programs and grant opportunities that the city offers. And I think that's even more critical as we have this ARPA money that we're putting out in various programs, that we are being creative in our public outreach. So I think we've come a long way in getting this information gathered, and there's a lot of ideas. And just to be clear to everybody listening, this is a community revitalization plan. This is not a funding mechanism in any way. So there's no dollars attached to it yet. As we just discussed with the public health issue, there is a lot of public dollars going, and the ARPA money is being targeted for things such as this. So stay tuned. There'll be more to come as that process goes through. But I just want to say thank you to Director Doolin. I see Assistant Director Allison back there, who is also very involved in this. And I'd be remiss if we didn't call out our former Senior Urban Planner for the 3rd District, Shannon Tetchy, for her work in getting this off the ground. And then Carrie Lynn Wick put the final touches on this. So thank you to all of those. Thank you to all the people in the community who engaged in this. And Director Doolin, with that, I'll pass it back to you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Welcome. Director?
Thank you, Councilman Riggenbach. Just to reiterate a couple points, these plans were created in partnership with IDA specifically with the goal of furthering opportunity for affordable housing in our community. The mayor and I met with Ida a few months ago to discuss the taking these plans forward. Essentially, what both of these plans provide opportunity for potential affordable housing developers in the future to get additional points when they're applying for the very competitive 9% tax credit deals that go through the state of Illinois. And I think having these plans in place really helps our housing developers know exactly what the goal and strategies of the neighborhood are. And as Councilman Riggenbach talked about, a lot of public discussion went in to developing the recommendations. And while the plan wasn't adopted, I think we took a lot of the opinions that were said in both the Southside Plan and the East Bluff Plan and how we shaped our American Rescue Plan dollars, whether it's the down payment assistance program that we're hoping to launch in about a month from now in conjunction with the discussions we've had with the Realtors Association and some financial lenders, to the demolition money to we've been using, and we'll spend $1 million in 2022 and 23 to take down. So while Councilman Riggenbach is absolutely right that this plan doesn't necessarily have specific funds tied to it, there's an opportunity there to get additional funds from the Illinois Housing and Development Authority, similar to the project that Jane Genzel with POF did up in East Bluff to create multiple units for people. Other projects can come down the road with this being in place. And really these are thoughts and ideas of how we are going to move forward with our planning process for the entire qualified census tract area. So excited for the opportunity to get this adopted, to help our nonprofit community when applying for grants. It's a lot of fantastic information in one document, so it should make their lives a little easier when putting things together. Just hats off to the staff before me who really worked to get this through, and appreciate all of your support on it.
Thank you, Director. Councilmember Ruckriegel? No? Your light was on. Must have been technical problem. It wasn't me this time. All right, Councilmember Riggenbach, do you have a motion?
I'll move for approval.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Velpula. Any comments, questions? Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do not want to take away from any of the hard work that anyone has done on this. I am, I'll be voting against this. Most of the, I think a great deal of the aim of IDA is to create points so that developers of multifamily subsidized housing can come in with very, very little risk, build nice, new, shiny buildings and when the tax credits run out, they also run out. I think my own opinion is what these neighborhoods need is not more subsidized multifamily housing. They need to reinforce the character of the neighborhood as it is and as it was, to encourage more home ownership, which I know that we're doing, and I'm very much in favor of that. But the aim of, you know, we could put together just as much effort in taking the rental properties that are there and finding out ways to make them better, and it would not disturb the nature of the neighborhood. But instead, we're going to come in and I think bring about things that, with all this verbiage and everything else, most neighbors don't really want. The North Valley didn't want this. South Side is very leery of outside funded, more subsidized housing, especially those who own homes there. I think the intentions here are very, very good. I just, I'm not sure this will work, so I will be probably alone voting against this. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. This is not about subsidized housing. It's about affordable housing. It's about home ownership. It's about affordable rents. It's, you know, I think the word subsidized is a misnomer at times. But I think we need some clarification and better understanding of affordable housing. Affordable housing is housing that individuals can afford based upon their income.
Yes.
That it typically doesn't exceed 30% of their income. And anyway, with that, I'll go back to Councilmember Riggenbach, and then we want to hear from some other members of the council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Councilman Kelly, I certainly understand your feelings of IDA and the cost involved in many of these programs, but I don't want you to lose sight of what the actual recommendations are. And again, I would turn you to page 79 here. Number one, the awareness of existing programs and grants. We're talking about things that we already have in place, the East Village Grow Sell TIF, the many opportunities coming with the programs that we approved earlier in this year, helping people transition from being renters to homeowners. If there's one thing I've heard as council member, that's the people want more homeowners in the neighborhoods. And how we do that, again, the page is open for actual execution on that, but that needs to be our goal. Safety, enough said on that. Youth employment, economic and housing needs, commercial development. The Wisconsin Avenue Corridor Plan, which we adopted many years ago, has had fits and starts as we've had funding available for that. So the people in the neighborhood, these hundreds of people that participated, these are things that they've asked for. Technical assistance to business. I'm so excited with some of the ARPA money going for that very thing. And then neighborhood pride, you alluded to that yourself. You know, we need to instill that cohesion and find ways to engage our neighborhood people. And we're going to have some placemaking grants in each council district. So I think a lot of the things here are way beyond what IDA perhaps asked for. But I think this is a great blueprint for us as a council to say, yes, this is what we value. This is what we've heard our constituents say they value. So I would respectfully ask you to reconsider, but I would ask everybody to support this as we move the community and specifically tonight the East Bluff forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jensen?
Thank you, Mayor Ali. I was just going to point out the points that Councilman Riggenbach pointed out what the recommendations are. Those 8, I don't think any of those are really about subsidized housing. In fact, number 2 is to encourage assist people transitioning from rental to home ownership, which is very important in the East Bluff. So I support this wholeheartedly, and I hope Councilman Kelly might take another look at this, because I don't think this plan that we're about to adopt is going to do what you're afraid it's going to do. Thank you.
Any questions for Director Doolin? Thank you for your hard work and efforts, Director. Seeing no more comments or questions, we have a motion that came from Councilman Riggenbach. It was seconded by Councilman Velpula. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes with 1 nay. Kelly. Madam Clerk?
22-143 is a communication with a request to concur with recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance rezoning property from Class R4 Single Family Residential District to a Class CN Neighborhood Commercial District for the property located at 2919 West Garden Street.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you. I would like to turn it over to Director Doolin again to talk through this item, and we do have some folks here that want to talk about it this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Manager. The request in front of you is a fairly straightforward request to rezone a property that staff is supportive of to allow a future development, but the petitioner is here, Mayor, and I would actually like to invite them to speak about their project. They can do it much more justice, and I think it's a project worth celebrating, so if you don't mind, we could invite their representative up.
Is that Reverend Craig Williams, Executive Director of Southside Mission? Welcome.
So, Madam Mayor and the Council, thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to thank Mr. Doolin and Leah and the City Manager and really many of you folks that we have shared this project with. This is for investment in the 61605. Southside Mission's footprint has been there since day one, going back to 1925, and we saw an opportunity which we wanted to replicate from our War Memorial thrift store. We were able to pay that building off, and all of the funds that are generated there go right back into ministry in the 61605. And so we wanted to do that same thing at our Garden Street location. So that is the purpose there, to create a thrift store there, which we really feel is about affirming dignity for those that will shop there in the 61605. We've already had the opportunity to talk to some residents nearby, very excited that the fact they're going to have not a building with a fresh coat of paint on it, but a brand new building full of affordable goods that they can buy with their own hard-earned dollars in the 61605. So instead of things that we hear so often leaving the 61605, this is something that's coming into the 61605. Also want to thank Councilwoman Jackson for her engagement with us as well, to come and hear the story of what we feel this will bring. Jobs to the 61605, where people who live in those neighborhoods can apply for and work. Vocational training, where people can learn how to work in retail and how to work in the associated warehouse that'll be with this project as well. So we really feel it's a huge win for the 61605. This is not money that anybody other than Southside Mission is investing in our own community, in our own neighborhood. So we thank everybody from the Zoning Commission to the Community Development, the City Manager's Office, and everybody that has helped us get to this point. We think it's just the beginning of a grand vision that Southside Mission has to help those we serve every day in the 61605. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for these? Do you have more to say, Reverend Williams?
Oh, I would add, too, that it will also allow us to have a warehouse, which is at our main location at 1127 South Laramie, that will allow us to also hire and also to encourage individuals in the community to volunteer, helps our youth to get work ready. So it is more than just a thrift store in 61605, but it has allowed us to be able to, as we break ground in July or June or July, would also allow us to open the warehouse that will house all of our opportunities for us to receive donations, and also it will be a drive-through warehouse. So we're just utilizing space that we've already had and trying to bring something to our community, as Rich said, to affirm dignity, to allow people to work in the community, especially our youth, and training them up. So thank you.
Council questions? Councilwoman Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a comment. I was excited when I had the opportunity to meet with Director Williams and the staff about this project. I can't remember in my memory that we've seen this much redevelopment take place, so I'm just excited about it, and I'm excited to the point that I believe once the project is completed, it'll be the beginning of hopefully spurring more economic redevelopment in that area as we look to try to bring some infrastructure improvements to Laramie and other areas in and around that neighborhood. Thank you very much and congratulations.
Do you have a motion, Councilwoman?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I would like to make a motion that item number 22-143 be approved as requested.
Is there seconded by Councilmember Kelly? Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to add my voice to, I think this is very exciting. I think this is going to help the neighborhood a lot. This is coming from the people who are there. This is not coming from the outside. These neighborhoods, I believe, can bring themselves back, and I appreciate very much what you're doing. You're going to have you're going to make a great addition to the neighborhood. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Welcome. Thank you, gentlemen. We have a motion on the floor to approve, and we had a second. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-144 is a communication with a request to deny the site application for a Class A tavern liquor license with on-site consumption and retail sale of alcohol for Exotic Vibes LLC, doing business as Exotic Vibes at 2608 North Sheridan Road, contingent upon the issuance of a certificate of occupancy with recommendation from the Liquor Commission to deny.
Council Capusta?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before you, you have the site application for 2608 North Sheridan. This was denied at the Liquor Commission level based in part on the police department's concern with that particular Sheridan Triangle. The fire department had also done an inspection and had substantial concerns about the change of occupancy of this particular building. Therefore, the city manager and I are also both recommending denial.
Councilmember Graham?
Move to deny.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Euler. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-145 is a communication from the City Manager, Director of Public Works, and Corporation Counsel with a request to adopt an ordinance to amend Chapter 31 of the Code of the City of Peoria relating to stormwater utility fee.
Is that you, Council?
Ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you again,
Yes.
Madam Mayor. Before you tonight, you have an ordinance that will make an amendment to our stormwater utility fee. We have largely invoiced and charged properties through the same method since the ordinance was originally adopted in 2017. One of the things that we've been looking at in conjunction with the Public Works Department is how to ensure the accuracy of the stormwater that is going into our system. And after examining some credits that are available for properties along the Illinois River, we've made a determination that we should offer that same credit opportunity to properties not along the Illinois River. So therefore, we've established language that would allow whether it be commercial or residential, any property owner who submits the proper engineering requirements and calculations, if they can identify and by engineering standards prove that they are capturing 100% of the stormwater fee, we have allowed for a substantial credit for that. There will remain a minimal user fee. We have also proposed that those that may be capturing and cleaning the stormwater on site, but then it is eventually released into the system, also received a 50% credit. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Questions for Council? Councilmember Jensen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't really have any questions. I just have a quick comment. I just wanted to thank Corporation Counsel and staff for coming back with this. I think it is an excellent and very good idea. because I've had a number of people, who say that they don't use the stormwater sewers, and all the water stays on their property, doesn't flow off. So I'm glad to see that we are now going to provide this option. So thank you, and I guess I move to approve.
Okay. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel. Any more comments, questions? Councilmember Graham?
If they're not contributing at all, why would they even have to pay 10%?
That's an excellent question. Even with our property owners along the Illinois River that are contributing 100% of their stormwater runoff to the Illinois River, there is still a usage that benefits all people using the citywide stormwater system. The fact that we have water flowing off streets, the fact that we have drains that are being cleaned so that water can flow, so that you can cross at grade crossings, so that the motoring public is safe, so that pedestrians are safer. There is a minimal benefit that every user in Peoria has.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to approve, and it's been seconded. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-119 is a communication with a request to adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 18, Article 4, subsections 97 and 103 of the Code of the City of Peoria regarding video gaming fees.
This Corporation Counsel, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a quick report back on what we were able to determine, Councilwoman Jensen asked us to look into whether or not any other communities had a sliding scale for any of their video gaming licensees fees, and we were able to determine that Carbondale has recently instituted such a fee that all of their brand new users pay a minimum licensing fee, and then after that it does go up substantially based on the prior year's revenue. When we looked at all of the other home rule communities, however, I will say what we determined is it's a bit all over the board. And based on this new law, nobody is quite sure how to yet amend their ordinances for those that are planning to. So with that, staff is actually asking for a deferral to our next meeting so that we can provide this information in a more thorough manner back to council.
Can we get a motion to defer? Yes. Okay, seconded by Councilmember Euler. Discussion, Councilmember Allen?
No discussion. I was going to make the motion to defer. So.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right, please cast your ballots. Motion to defer, 2 weeks. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-146 is a communication from the City Manager and Finance Director Comptroller with a request to receive and file a report regarding public safety pension fees.
Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to turn the floor over to our Finance Director, Kyle Craddy, who will walk through a presentation that kind of talks about our pensions. This was at the request of Councilman Sear that we come back and provide this report back to the council, so we wanted to do that for you all. So,
in the council packet, you had the presentation that I'm going to walk through tonight.
Do you have it up there or no?
Kind of that overview, the pensions represent a significant portion of the compensation of public employees. Pensions are monthly payments paid to individuals or their surviving dependents in consideration of past service. Illinois has 5 statewide systems, including SERS, JRS, JARS, TRS, and SERS. 10 pension systems that cover Cook County and the Chicago public employees. There are 650 police and fire pension funds for all the municipalities outside of Chicago. That consolidation process of those funds is currently in process. The fire side of the municipal pensions are about 95% of the assets have been transferred to the new public funds, and the police side is still working on that transfer. The Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, which covers, and also the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, which covers all other local government employees in the state. In terms of a benefits overview, in terms of the police side of the pension equation, the employees contribute 9.91% of their salary. They do not contribute to Social Security. Their final rate of earnings is based off of their salary on their final day. They have full retirement eligibility at age 50 with 20 years of service. And then their pension formula is 2.5% of their final rate of earnings times years of service. They have no early retirement penalty. The maximum pension for police is 75% of their final rate of earnings. And then I think the other item to note is that their cost of living adjustment is 3% on a compounded basis, and that we'll get into that in a second with some of the other pension systems. In terms of fire, they contribute 9.455% of salary, as well as similar to police, their calculations are the same in terms of their final rate of earnings as well as their compounded interest. In terms of IMRF, the employee contributions are 4.5% of salary, and then the employee also contributes 6.2% of their salary to Social Security. The final rate of earnings is the average of the highest 4 years of the last 10. Full retirement is at age 60 with 8 years of service, or age 55 with 35 years of service. The pension formula is 1.6%, 7% of your earnings the first 15 years, or 2% after 15 years. In the early retirement penalty, there is one if you retire early. The maximum pension is 75% of your final rate of earnings at 40 years of service. And then the primary difference between the downstate public safety pensions versus the IMRF is on the compounded versus simple interest. So the IMRF pensions are calculated on your final or your first pension check. That 3% interest is done on that original amount, not the compounded amount as you go on through your retirement. In terms of Tier 2, the state legislature, in terms of the public safety pension component of Tier 2, did do some benefit changes back in 2019 when they put through the consolidation bill. That includes one of the main changes was survivor benefits. Previously, under Tier 2, survivor benefits did not exist until you were vested. They changed it to include that they are available immediately for survivor benefits. The cap on earnings, or the cap on your final rate of earnings calculation, is now also a full full CPI instead of half CPI. And then the calculation of your final rate of earnings went from your highest last 96 months, or your average of your last 96 months, to the highest last 4 of your last 5. So that's just kind of an overview of some of the benefit structure. And just as a reminder, that benefit structure is set at the state level. And so that's not something that the city has control over, making those adjustments. In terms of what affects the funded, unfunded liabilities, the primary things that address your unfunded liabilities are any salary increases that are given to staff, the employee contribution amounts. So if those were changed by state statute, that would also change the unfunded liability. Employer contributions. So the employer contributions, if those were increased, those would also change your unfunded liability. And conversely, if they were lowered, would also increase your unfunded liability. Investment returns. The public safety pensions actuarial rate of return is 6.5%. And so obviously those years that the fund does not reach 6.5% earnings, we obviously are not meeting our investment returns. Benefit increases, so just like in 2019 when there were benefit increases given to Tier 2 employees, that also will increase our unfunded liability. Actuarial assumptions, so when they do address things like the actuarial tables, that can also change the assumptions into the plan, which could increase the unfunded liability. And then obviously the last one is plan demographics. And so how our workforce is made up, how many employees that we have, the age of that workforce also drives your anticipated cost of your pension plan in the long run. In terms of what the responsibilities are of each individual entity, the state's responsibility is the state establishes benefit levels for employees. They determine contribution levels for employees. They determine the pension board composition. They determine the investment mix as well as the limitations within that investment mix. The individual pension boards, which is obviously a work in progress with the downstate police and fire with the changes to the consolidated plan. They establish the fund targeted rate of return. They hire the investment manager. They determine the investments, and they make duty disability determinations for those who are still working. The actuary sets the employer contribution level. And then lastly, the city levies the taxes to collect the employer contribution. Really, the city's responsibility is to ensure that we are making the contribution that's necessary to fund the plan. In terms of the scope of what the city's funded liability versus unfunded liability is at the end of 2020, the city had a $367 million funded liability, but the city also had a $396 million unfunded liability. This put the city at a funded ratio of 48% on the downstate police and fire. In terms of looking at that on a per capita basis, for the residents of the city of Peoria, that equates to a $3,488 per capita cost to fully fund that unfunded liability. The other thing to look at is the overall pension liability at the state level for all residents. There is a total liability of $237 billion at the state level. That includes a $99.5 billion funded liability, and then the state has a $143.1 billion unfunded liability. So they have a funded ratio of 40%. So if you look at the city of Peoria in comparison to the state as a whole, we are still at a higher funded ratio than the state. The per capita cost to an individual in the state of Illinois for that unfunded liability right now sits at $11,168. I think one of the primary concerns that we've discussed is as this cost continues to grow, not only for the city of Peoria, but also at a state level, the cost to fund our unfunded liability is starting to crowd out other essential services. So pensions at the state level, in this coming 2023 budget, will consume 23.6% of state source general fund revenues. That's up from 7% in 2008. For the city, pensions will consume 22.5% of city operating revenue in 2022, and that is up from 11% in 2008. One item to obviously look at also is looking at the individual property tax bills within the city of Peoria. I just want to remind the council that currently the city's portion of the tax bill sits at 12% for the individual who owns a home in the city of Peoria. The other item of note is if you look at our overall tax levy that you approve annually in November, right now for the year 2021, the levy itself, $18.9 million of that levy goes towards pension obligations. We have $3.2 million that goes towards roads, which is included in our existing infrastructure and our debt. and then we have $0 that goes towards our general fund to support operations from our tax levy. So all of our tax levy is going towards pensions and roads currently. Another item to take into account is the change in headcount with the city for the city. When you look back at 2002, the total head count for the city was 892 people. As of 2022, in the budget that was approved by council, we have 653 employees. To staff the 239 FTEs cut since 2002, the city would need an additional $30.5 million to fund that the staffing changes since 2002. One other item is looking at the future obligations as well as contributions. For 2022, if you remember during the budget, the police pension fund had a requirement of $14.5 million. The fire pension had a requirement of $13.2 million. So our total pension contribution for 2022 was $27.7 million. And if you look at kind of our revenue sources that are funding our pensions, right now that sits at the $14.8 million from property tax, additional $4.5 million from PPRT, and then we obviously, the pension fee was sunset, and so we had a general fund transfer needed of $8.4 million to make up that difference of what our required contributions are and our revenue sources. And obviously, as we go out on the curve, I think it's very clear that that operational or that general fund transfer is going to continue to increase to make the contributions that are necessary to fund the pensions at 90% by 2040. I guess the ultimate goal and the requirement currently set by state law is that both of these pension plans need to be funded at 90% by 2040. So what that ultimately means for the city is that as of right now, the benefits that we're paying out will exceed contributions up until 2032. The city will need to increase contributions from $26 million this year to $84 million in 2040, if all else holds consistent, to make sure that we're funding the pensions at the required amounts. And that's an increase of $494 million over the next 20 years to reach that state requirement currently sitting there at 90% by 2040. Obviously, I know a lot of the conversation was about how to solve this problem and ways that we can address this. But I think it's also important to look at some of the roadblocks facing us in terms of addressing the issue. Obviously, there is always the constitutionality of any changes that would get made to existing benefits that are being provided by the state. There's a clause in the Illinois Constitution that says that pension membership is a contractual relationship that shall not be diminished or impaired. And the courts have, for the last many years, have held up that clause to say that any benefit changes to current members are unconstitutional. And so that's one of the roadblocks that we've seen over the last few years. So really, and I think this is where the conversation is intended to go tonight, is kind of what's next. And I think I want to come here and tell you there's easy solutions to this, but there's not a lot of easy solutions to address this in the short term. Some of the options that are out there would be a constitutional amendment. This obviously would require 60% vote by the state legislature to pass. And they could look at something like the compounded COLA versus the simple interest. While that may not seem like a huge cost savings in the long term for these plans, it is a relatively large cost savings if you're looking at having retirees on your plan for up to 20 to 30 years. So that could bring down that cost curve for the pension plans. Other options are buyouts of future benefit increases. That could reduce future costs, but once again, that would be a constitutional question on whether or not the state could actually do that could do that legally. Pension obligation bonds. This is an item that is, I think, becoming more and more an idea that people are discussing. And for context, within the state of Illinois, there have been, in the last couple of years, 2 pension obligation bonds issued. The city of Moline did an $85 million pension obligation bond, and the village of Skokie just recently did a $150 million pension obligation bond. In essence, pension obligation bonds, the point of doing them is to, in essence, sell your bonds to cover your existing liability. And the end goal is that you want your actuarial rate of return that you're making on your pension plan to be higher than your earnings. Obviously, there is a lot of inherent risks associated with doing that. A lot of communities did it in a time where interest rates were low. I know from our last bond issuance that if we had waited a month, we'd be looking at a 1% or 100 basis point increase in our cost if we had waited 1 month to do that bond, just because the market has fluctuated that much in the municipal space in the last month and a half. Obviously, the other concerns with pension obligation bonds is, what do we do in a situation where the market goes down 10%, 15%? I think we've all been through that in the last 15 to 20 years. And then now, all of a sudden, we've issued these pension obligation bonds and we have an unfunded liability, again, that we're having to fund. And so there's inherent risks, and it's something that the manager and I have discussed, and it's something that we've looked at. But obviously, at this point, the risks to us outweigh what the potential savings could be in that. But obviously, that's one of the options that's out there. An area that was brought up at the state level this year, my understanding is it did not make it out of committee, was redoing the amortization schedule with the debt. There were 2 pieces of legislation at the state level. One was to move the funding window to 2050 from 2040, and another bill to move the required contribution from 90% to 80%. Neither one of those made it out of committee. Obviously, both of those would be a situation where it could save, it could at least smooth out these cost increases and give cities and villages throughout the state the opportunity to address this more in the long term versus what now is becoming a shorter window of that 2040 timeframe. Obviously, and it's not a popular conversation, but as additional revenues, there's always the ability for the state to look at taxing retirement benefits, because the state of Illinois currently does not tax retirement benefits. They could look at sales tax on services to offset some of these costs, or to add some additional revenue. But once again, that has an additional cost to the taxpayers of the state as well as the city. And so those a lot of times don't really go anywhere, but those are options that are out there. And unfortunately, the other option is service reductions. As we discussed earlier, we're looking at going from $26 million to upwards of $80 million for our contribution by 2040. And that would be a conversation where we would need to have some discussions on service reductions, short of additional revenues, to get us to that required contribution in 2040. And that's what I had, and obviously the city manager and I are here for any questions that you have. I know there's a lot of information. I apologize for not having the PowerPoint up there for you to review, but we're here to answer any questions that you have.
This is very thorough, very painful, but very thorough. Councilmember Sear.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Mr. Manager and Director Craddy, thank you very much for this work. We've seen these reports before, though, and you've touched on a lot of different buckets that I need a little clarification on. Number one, you made a comment that I was kind of shocked. You kind of made it real quick, but it was sold to us, and it's got nothing to do with this report, but you made the comment that the Tier 1
consolidation, or a tier 2 consolidation of pension down south, or no, south of Illinois, south of I-80, I believe, was going to save a lot of money to the taxpayers. But you made a comment about increasing benefits for survival. Can you comment on that a little bit? I mean, are the savings that we're going to have all been spending on the extra benefits?
You know, it's hard to say exactly what the costs associated with the 3 benefit changes that were included in that pension consolidation bill, but they obviously have increased our costs, because it's not to sit here and say that tier 2 doesn't exist anymore for public safety pensions, but it did increase some of the benefits. So when you do increase the benefits on these plans, you are going to see an increase in your unfunded liability.
Okay. Here's a few questions for you. Tell us a little bit about pension bonds. Where does it fit into our budget? Are these GO revenue bond? What kind of bonds are they? How does it affect our rating?
So they would be taxable bonds if City Council wanted to explore those. Taxable bonds, a lot of times when we come to you and ask for bond issuances, we're looking at non-taxable general obligation bonds. These would be taxable general obligation bonds. Traditionally, when you're selling a taxable bond, you're going to be paying anywhere from 100 to 150 basis points more on a taxable basis, because normally the investor, they enjoy that non-tax status of those bonds because they don't have to pay taxes on it. So the earnings, they're willing to accept a lower rate of return for that. And so from that standpoint, they would be taxable. In terms of how the bond rating agencies have traditionally looked at these, is they do look at these as a swap of liability. So when they look at our bond rating, when they look at our financials right now, they're already looking at and saying that we have $396 million in future debt obligations for the pensions. Now, at the same time, the big difference and change to me, and kind of the discussions as well with the Government Finance Officers Association and their stance on this as well, is that you're moving something from a soft liability to a hard liability. The minute you issue this debt, we are locked into this $396 million unfunded liability. If the state comes back and moves that amortization window out to 2050, or they lower the amount of the required contribution to 80%, we're now at 90% funded by 2040. And so it's that risk of, if you do it, you're stuck with that liability through 2040 when the bonds would be paid off.
Tell us a little bit. I don't have pages on the presentation. It was not up there, but your slide talks about pension will consume 22.5% of the city operating revenue. Then later on in the presentation, we talked about where eventually it's going to be 80% of our real estate tax revenue. Can you talk to us a little bit about, be more specific, what the difference between the two, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So the slide you were talking about was the pensions or crying out services slide. So 22.5%, that's looking at our overall general fund operational revenue. So that's inclusive of obviously not property taxes in the general fund, but sales taxes, income taxes, PPRT, and just all of our general revenues. That amount of our pensions are taking up 22.5% of that number. In terms of the property tax levy, that's looking just at the property tax levy component. That once again is not included in the general fund, but we are sitting currently at about $18.9 million that we are contributing for the pension amounts directly from our property tax levy. And so obviously short of an increase to that property tax levy, we're going to be looking at having to find additional revenue sources to transfer into the pension funds, just like we have been, to cover those costs.
So just to make sure, I'd like to talk about dollars a little bit. $18 million, you just said, is our responsibility. What is our total revenue from our real estate taxes?
We look at it currently, when you exclude, obviously, existing bond obligations, we're looking at around $22 million.
Last question, I'm sorry, Madam Mayor.
Take your time.
Last question that you had about, I believe there's about 6 bullet points. How many of these bullet points, the last page, do we control right here around this horseshoe?
Really, if you look at the different bullet points, really, the City Council has the opportunity to make the decision on pension obligation bonds. And then the City Council has the ability to make decisions on additional revenues or service reductions. Those are really the 3 areas that Council has any control over.
Thank you very much for this great report. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Madam Mayor.
Thank you for requesting this report. It's very informative. We have a lot of discussion coming. First, we have Councilmember Riggenbach, followed by Councilmember Ruckriegel, then Councilmember Allen, and then Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Riggenbach.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Picking up on those bullet points that Councilman Sear just referenced, I think it's important to remember the mayor called a meeting with Representative Spain and Representative Gordon Booth last fall to talk about this very topic, and we should make sure they get a copy of this PowerPoint too, I think, because it really graphically explains a lot. So before I go further, thank you, Director and Mr. Manager, for putting this in such understandable manner. I would like to just point out, though, the public safety pensions, who's responsible slide, the nice black and white slide. I think it's important to look at what the state passes to us as that classic unfunded mandate. They establish the benefit level. So how many times have we been out in the public and people say, well, just why do they get such a high pension? And well, that's not an answer we can give because that comes from the state. The contribution level for employees, the pension board composition. But to me, of the 4 things that the state does, the one that makes me roll my eyes and take a deep breath is they determine the investment mix limitations. And that's something that I would strongly suggest as a financial professional that perhaps the pension board would be better equipped for that. But again, that the appetite of this council to look at the next steps, those bullet points again, additional revenue, service reductions, I think we can probably find ways that we would object to those nearly unanimously. So I really think we need to zero in on that reamortization and the investment mix too. But reamortization, I think, is really the thing that is going to give us the most relief and the most tangible relief. And part of that discussion with our state representatives was getting other like-minded cities together. And I know the mayor's done a lot of legwork on that already. So I would just keep that in front of us. And unfortunately, this session I think was a little bit odd in Springfield, as if they're not all odd, but being a shortened session and with the primary being where it is, that created some unusual dynamics. But I would suggest to my colleagues that we zero in on reamortization as a logical step, that getting the stakeholders together, and I see our local 50 chief in the back row there. Good evening, Mr. Martin. Having that partnership and making this not just something driven from the council, but something that we can work together for the sustainability, for the public safety of our firefighters, of our community. So I know there's a lot to be said, you said, so I'll just cut it short, but I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we've had similar discussions in the past, and from my perspective, that reamortization and working with our state representatives and the labor groups is where the logical answer lies. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, and I agree with you 100%. And, you know, I think that's the way to go. But not just a short schedule, but an election year really has gotten in the way with even, you know, moving these discussions forward this year. So it's been quite a challenge. But IML has been carrying this for a long time, over a decade. But, you know, working to extend the date through 2050. We prefer 2060. But also that rate change from 90% to 80% would be extremely helpful in terms of an appetite for this. Councilmember Ruckriegel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Councilman Sear, for asking for this report. Thank you, Director and City Manager, for putting this together. There's a lot of great information here. And first off, I hope we're going to put this on the website. I think this ought to be easily gotten on the website. Let me start by saying that, before I forget, Madam Mayor, thank you very much for putting that meeting together. I was actually at my aunt's funeral that day, and I called from the car and was able to join, and thank you very much. And I think that having that conversation with our local leadership in Springfield is really important, and I think if we can arm them with this as well, this gives them some more data. I know we were giving them some there as well, but I think this is a great presentation. A couple of questions on the presentation, and then I guess a couple of comments too. One, we talk about the cost per person that we have right now, and I guess I'd also like to see that a different way if we could. And I don't know the best way to do this, but maybe it is by property value that's taxed on the real estate, you know, at $100 or whatever, because not everybody is going to be paying the same. The burden is not carried by all. And what stands out to me is we keep talking about 2040. And I don't think that there's a parent, probably that I normally talk to, that says that they wouldn't love their kids to be able to raise their family in the same town that they are. Grandparents want their grandkids to be able to be raised near them. 2040 is one generation away. And what we do in 2040 is going to determine whether our next generation decides to live here or not. And so we don't have a lot of time. I know it was a shortened cycle. I know it was election year, but what better year to tackle the conversations that this one would have been? And I would have challenged on both sides of the aisle that this would have been the year to really make some hay and work together on solving this problem. Because I think back, and what I'm looking at here is a couple of questions on the graph of what does the future hold. And I just want to make sure that I'm reading this right. I'm assuming that we're looking at the same city staffing in this picture, not increasing staffing.
That's correct. This assumes the current staffing levels, and obviously if there are positions that someone leaves, they'd be replaced within that model.
And I appreciate that, and I'm glad for that clarification. It's hard to imagine that we would be talking to the council that's going to be here in 20 years and say you can't have an extra single person than what we have today. But that's kind of what we're talking about, and we've got to adjust for something in there. And are we taking into effect also the increased cost of salaries and benefits that are going to come in? So those are already booked in here, correct?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And I think about the services that we are asked to provide for our city, and if we, again, look at that 2040, but let's go 20 years back to 2002. And I think the city today provides a lot different services than we did back then. And we're doing it really on fewer people, unfortunately. And that's not anything I think that we really like to do. But if you take another generational gap beyond that, it was 1982. The city services that are going to be expected in 2040 are going to be different than what we have today. And yet, with what we have in front of us, we don't have any ability to grow our staff to be able to meet those challenges of the next generation. Again, I go back to what are we leaving our kids and the decision that they want to be able to do here. Question for city manager, and with the way that this is structured, our operational budget really is dictated by our ability to tax other things, correct? Our sales tax and other pieces.
You're absolutely correct.
And-
And one point I want to just add to your comment earlier about property tax and property values and the impact on that. Council has made the conscious decision to freeze the property tax rate. So with that being frozen, there is, other than EAV growth, there is no change in the impact on the property taxpayer. We're having to find other revenues in order to be able to support this increased pension obligation.
If this were to all fund, as we're looking at what it costs right now per citizen, and maybe it's done through a taxable, it's not all going to be carried by everybody on average. We know our average whenever we do what a stormwater fee on average does. It seems like everybody pays a lot more than that. I'm sure there are some people that pay a lot less, but it seems like a lot of people pay a lot more. And that's what concerns me is this is really, I think, a situation where sometimes I think there are outside forces that would love to say that the police, the fire, the city council, the city manager on opposite sides, I think we all agree that this is a problem we have to solve, we want to solve it together. And that is actually the only way this is going to get solved. And because I think anything that happens in Springfield is going to need sort of the blessings of all. And I would encourage those conversations we've had to continue. I think we've got to speak with one voice because we want to be able to provide the benefits we promised, but we've got to be also able to have a city in 2040, and we've got to be able to increase staff in all departments that we're going to need. And so what I see here is failure to act, and we don't have a lot of control. And I go back to Councilman Sear, pointed that out. We really don't have. And I don't think anybody wants to cut services, and we don't want to increase revenues. So the only other thing we have is to really push on Springfield to be able to act on that. And I would agree. There are two options that I'm comfortable with: is really pushing to move that amortization and to be able to lower that amount that goes in there. And we've got to have that done sooner rather than later because every year we are burning cash that needs to be reinvested into this to be able to save for our next generation. Or they will decide if they want to pick up and have to pick up the burden that we've left them. Thank you.
Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Director, for this report. Just a question, because I would like to research this. You mentioned that some cities have executed, looking at pension obligation bonds. If you don't have maybe a list, on hand that you can recite, could you provide that so that just that way we can see what cities, the populations of those cities, what were the amount of those bonds, just so that way, just for research purposes, I can look into that.
I can absolutely get that for council.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Director, years ago, I handled police and fire pension funds from various communities around the state. When I started doing that, the only thing they could buy were treasuries, and which have they're virtually no risk, so there was virtually no return. We did work with the legislature and got a little bit of an opening for some stock mutual funds, et cetera. What kind of investment mix is allowed today in police and fire pension funds?
It's still not aggressive enough for the actuarial assumptions in these plans. Currently, like I said, the city plans sit at 6.5%. That a conscious decision was made in the last few years to actually drop it from 7.5%. Because to your point, what they're allowed to invest in and what a lot of is being invested in is still treasuries and low risk, low return investments. It's not even necessarily the same mix of other pension plans.
Yes,
Councilman, I believe it's 65% in equities, 35% in cash fixed investments and bonds. So that will change as it gets consolidated into the kind of statewide pension funds, but that's what it is today.
Well, that's where I was headed. IMRF is supposedly one of the best public pension funds in the country. But my understanding on consolidation was that there wasn't any change in the investment mix. But perhaps I'm incorrect about that.
The local pension boards don't have the same investment authority that IMRF does.
No, I understand. We're talking about the consolidated fund. That's a Springfield fund. That's not a local fund. Okay, and
well, the police fund's going to be across the street. They're renting space from us.
I'm sorry, that's a Peoria fund. But it seems to me that among the things we want to talk about with our legislature is to allow that consolidated fund to mimic or to have the same rules of engagement, let's say, in investment as IMRF does. That would make an important and a significant long-term difference in our liability. Or not in our well, it would. But anyway, also, and with the bullet points, which was there we go. One of the things, with all due respect, that you left out of your excellent report was the tax revenue that we would derive from substantial growth in our city's economy. And I think we sit here and we are all concerned about City Hall, and we're here to serve our citizens, not to serve by default, say, City Hall. The mayor passed out a paper 2 weeks ago talking about getting cities going and rolling. We can't put it on here as far as a prediction, of course, but we should be concentrating on things like that very much instead of accepting the status quo, which means, well, we're all going to go broke one of these days. I think we reject that, but we're not doing things that really are going to provide enough growth to be worthy of our citizenry. So, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I don't have any questions because this is a picture that I've been painting for over 5 years, since before I came on the council. So this is more of a jumping on my soapbox moment here. One of the slides in this packet we got says, "What does the future hold?" And I wrote a word at the top of that slide, and it says bankruptcy, because that's exactly what this means. $26 to $84 million a year in payments on a $200 roughly million budget. That is the end of a death spiral if there ever was one. And this slide exactly paints that picture. If we can't get everyone to work together on the same page to fix this, we won't pay any staff. I've taken a lot of heat over the years from unions and staff members and public for my commentary and discussion on cutting staff. I didn't get elected to this job to cut staff. No one comes here wanting to cut staff. But if we didn't cut some staff, we're not going to pay any staff. And that should be the siren to our employees and our unions that they have to work with us to help us fix this problem, because none of them will get paid. No one will get paid. We will not be able to pay bills because there is absolutely no funding mechanism to support this. And shame on Springfield for addressing completely ridiculous things during this session, like video gaming reform, rather than tackling pensions. They have the opportunity to fix this. They are the ones that control the levers that are going to help us address this problem, and they are the ones choosing not to address it. We have to have help from them, and we are all going to have to work together to fix it or throw them all out, because something has to change. This is a system that absolutely cannot be paid for. We don't have the money, and we will eventually cut ourselves to a point where there is zero left in the bank. Everything in this packet tells the exact story that each of these budget conversations that we've had to have been about. It's the fact that these payments are growing at a much faster pace in our economy throughout the entire state of Illinois, and every municipality in the state is on that same path. It's just a matter of how deep down that path we are. And if we don't all get together, staff, employees, council members, legislators, and the governor, and figure out a solution, it won't matter, because none of us will be able to be here to run a government and then see what happens. And all this has been is kicking the can year after year after year, and there are no levers left for us to pull. The idea of taking bonds out to shore this up is insanity to me. That's like throwing a ball on the roulette wheel and seeing which color comes up and whether or not it's the one that sends your ship under the water or the one that finds a way to give you a couple more bucks to make it another year. And we have to find a way to get together and deal with this and push Springfield to actually deal with real problems when they go to session, and not some of the ridiculous stuff that they choose to take up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jensen?
Thank you, Mayor Ali. Hard act to follow there. But I do a couple points I want to make, especially for our listening audience and the citizens. This is not a Peoria problem. I know we're trying to explain that most of this, it's out of our control, and the state has set most of it, but many municipalities in the state are facing this. And I just would like you to confirm that either.
This is absolutely a statewide problem. This is every municipality in the state that has a police department, and every municipality that has a fire department, and every fire protection district has these issues.
Thank you. So that's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is that we have, this city, in the 27 years I've lived here, the first 7 was working for the city of Peoria. We have cut services drastically since I started here 27 years ago. I mean, we have this chart that was provided. It shows just since 2002, we've lost 60% of our staff in community development. When I was here, we started and did systematic environmental and housing inspections, and we had a very elaborate program. This city was never allowed to do it more than a few years because of our pension obligations partly, and we had to cut staff and cut those programs. So I think Councilman Ruckriegel, pointed out we don't want to have to cut services years down the road, but that's what we've been doing, and we can't keep doing that. I don't have the answers. I do think it has to be a combination of things. It can't just be re-amortization. We also have to look at, like Councilman Kelly said, getting Springfield to change the limitations on these investment decisions that these pension boards, of the Consolidated Pension Board, can make. So it's similar to IMRF. I mean, we have to lobby for all of it together with municipalities. I think the funding obligations need to be looked at and changed. I also think we need to lobby to extend the date that we have to be fully funded by. It has to be a combination of everything, and that's still not going to solve it. I guess as I close, I'd like to find out what is the Illinois Municipal League doing? I know in the past, when we finally got under Pritzker and Deputy Governor Dan Hines at the time, we got them with the lobbying efforts of the IML to get Springfield and finally get it passed to consolidate all these local pension boards into one, and that is going to have an impact. But that was through all of us working with the Municipal League to make that happen. So I guess my question is, what's going on right now with the Municipal League, and what are they lobbying for? So we can all work together to do that.
The Municipal League has consistently had pension reform as one of their legislative initiatives. Mayor Ali serves on the board of the IML and is as the mayor of Peoria, it is there at the board meetings and has had the conversations with Executive Director Cole and other members of the Municipal League board that are facing this. And this is a constant refrain that they hear from the IML, that this is a major issue for cities across Illinois.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. We're going to go around again because we got here again from Councilmember Ruckriegel and Councilmember Kelly and anybody else that turns their lights on. But I do want to say this first. It is possible to increase revenues without increasing taxes. It's possible. How is that done? It's called renewed economic growth. Renewed economic growth. And once that takes hold, taxpayers, they earn more money, they move into higher tax brackets. At the same time, we have job creation that rebounds. And that creates more taxpayers than what we've had before. So that combines to pour in more and more money into our city coffers. We've got to focus on renewed economic growth for Peoria. And we'll talk about that when we get into strategic planning. But that's one way to begin to counter some of these issues. Councilmember Ruckriegel?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and couldn't agree more. And I want to repoint out just how true Councilwoman Jensen's comments were, and they go to that exact fact. When she talks about what the city used to be able to do out of the different departments that have been cut over the years and have been on the chopping block, those are things that help build the economy of our city. They help protect our infrastructure. And those cuts have worked against us. And I think that is a perfect example about looking what we've had to cut, and it's things that we keep asking for around here that we'd like to bring back because we know how important it is. And I think that her example of that is spot on. And so thank you for mentioning that as well. And I know that this is an Illinois problem, but it's not the same across all of Illinois. Some are a little bit ahead in the race, some are a little bit behind in the race. Is there a way that we could get a comparison to where other cities, we can forget Chicago because evidently they have their own rules on how they're going to handle this, so let's forget Chicago, but where are other cities in central Illinois, in southern Illinois, and where do we compare to them?
There's the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability puts out a pension report. It's 1,000 pages long because it's covering all 600 pension funds, police and fire pension funds across the state. But it has all the funding levels of all of those plans. We'll be happy to send you the link.
Okay. Well, you've got some people who love to read around this council, so I'm sure that as I'm looking to Councilmember Kelly as well, he and I might be the first ones to start diving into it. I know Councilmember Euler will as well, because those are some things that I think that we need to find out where we are, because we're not equal across all of Illinois. And, we're trying to get people to move to the city. And this is a determination sometimes of why people move on one side of the city line or on the other side of the city line. And so I think to know where we are in that. I would appreciate that. Look forward to being able to have those conversations with our legislators. And I would think that maybe on the next time that we all get together, when the city, the county, the health department all meet, and we have that morning that is really a great morning where we have our legislators and we talk about our priorities, can we set another hour and a half to that, to where we can actually all sit down at the table? This needs to be priority number one. And you know what? It's a great way for us as a community to lead maybe in the state, because we aren't the only ones facing this, but I think that we're going to be on this, ahead in this race a lot more than other ones, and we've got to have that conversation. So thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just correction number 37 here. I was informed by the manager some good news that as these funds are consolidated, the police and fire pension funds are consolidated in Springfield, that the same rules that apply to IMRF are going to apply to that consolidated fund. So thank you, Mr. Manager, for clarifying that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Somebody want to move to receive and file? This Councilmember Kelly, seconded by Councilmember Graham. Oh, we got another Councilmember Sear? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sorry, I just want to make a statement and then we'll move on. Director, do we have the authority or the power to adjust some of these goals that I want to verify with you? 3 of them. Number 1, do we have the authority to adjust the amortization schedule?
No.
Do we have the authority to change the increase from simple or from compound increase to simple increase?
No.
And do we have the authority or the power to change the goal from the funding goal from 90% to, let's say, 70%?
No.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing the discussion, Councilman Sear. The motion is to receive and file. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-147 is a communication with a request to receive and file a discussion on panhandling.
Okay, Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We really started this discussion back in July after the federal courts had struck down anybody in Illinois' ability to enforce the state panhandling statute. And throughout the pandemic and within the last year, many people have expressed concern to the city that they've seen an increase in this type of behavior within the city of Peoria. We've had several discussions on it, and recently I gave you lots of legal research that showed how we reached our conclusions. But I do think that there's a couple things I just want to go back and point out. Originally back last year in July and then again in September, we talked about the ability to look at clarifying and regulating anything that obstructs traffic. And what we discussed then was we already have some good ordinances and some good state traffic laws on the books that if somebody is standing in the roadway, we have the ability to already deal with an obstruction of traffic. We talked about some sort of ordinance that would prohibit folks from standing in the medians or perhaps within the intersections, if that's what we were seeing. We looked at what other communities were doing, who had traffic data to support those ordinances and who didn't. If you recall, we did give you a copy of a study that we had performed by Hansen Engineering that looked at the traffic data within the city of Peoria between 2017 and 2021. And when you controlled for the groups of students that are all leaving the high school at the exact same time, that left us with exactly 1 pedestrian versus motorist incident each year that may or may not have been the result of somebody standing within one of the medians. So our traffic data did not very aggressively support the idea that we could perhaps look at this any further from a public safety perspective. We have not had the traffic study updated since September of 2021, so it's possible there is some additional data, but nothing that immediately jumped out at either the chief or I. So what we suggested in our memo was, after lots of research, we know that some communities are putting up signs within their municipalities that discourage panhandling and instead suggest that folks give to local charities. We had some concern about the language we saw on some of those signs about calling out one specific charity over another. So staff worked to come up with language, and I think the chief has a copy, an example. I think the chief has a copy of the sign that staff worked to come up with. It's very simple. It says panhandling or soliciting unsafe in the median. We are working with our traffic engineers to identify the criteria for what locations those will be placed at. We know already that we anticipate them to tell us they should be placed on roadways and intersections where we have a certain speed limit. Perhaps that's 40 miles an hour, perhaps it's greater or lower, but we know that there will be a speed limit component. We also anticipate that they are going to identify as part of the criteria medians that truly were never intended to be pedestrian refuges. So perhaps it's medians that are going to be 2 feet or less in width. Those are the types of criteria that we're waiting for them to come back to us with. When those are identified, we anticipate placing those signs at those locations that will help notify the motoring public that that is not a good area for them to stop. It has been identified as falling within potential safety concerns, and that would protect both, hopefully, the motorist, the person standing in the pedestrian, and then as well as any pedestrians that might be crossing if that's a marked crosswalk. We know that we are not the only community facing this issue. When we reached out to our colleagues, every community, after having the Supreme Court largely strike down our ability to regulate it, and a federal court prohibit us from enforcing the state statute, every community seems to be struggling with what to do next. So signs seem to be the first place that many folks are starting. The other avenue that some communities are evaluating is whether or not they want to license all solicitations on public roadways. That we've had that discussion before about if there were folks that were doing perhaps a baseball tag day, perhaps it's the firefighters fill the boot campaign. If they all were going to be licensed, that's another option that some are looking at. Other communities are really struggling with what they've told us is aggressive panhandling. Although we've had maybe 1 or 2 of those instances reported, luckily that does not appear to be really where our struggle is here in Peoria, and we, from a safety perspective, appreciate that. Springfield is still looking at their aggressive panhandling, although unfortunately they've really been hit with a lot of litigation for every route that they have tried. Again, talking to our colleagues, everybody seems to be struggling with what the follow-up to this will be. We do know that a bill is in committee. It doesn't look like it's gained any traction. We're not sure that's actually going to go anywhere. It seems to be largely a repeat of the bill that was struck down, so I think there would have to be a substantial rewrite of it before we saw that actually make it through committee. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
There's lots. Councilmember Graham.
Thank you, Corporation Counsel. The last paragraph of the memo states that you're going to stick to your guns on this. It says staff is recommending that Section 28-169 be amended to prohibit a person remaining upon a street and median and obstructing traffic. Is that still the recommendation? Earlier it mentions, of course, that no vehicle shall be operated or allowed to remain upon any street in such a manner as to form an unreasonable obstruction to traffic. And therefore, this is the logical outgrowth, I believe, of that. Staff is hereby recommending that Section 28-169, that talks about cars, be amended to prohibit a person remaining upon a street and median and obstructing traffic. Because I'm happy to make a motion to direct you to bring something back. And then also, I want to make certain Councilman Kelly's okay, and we have a motion to receive and file. Right?
We can certainly do that, and I know that our office was asked to make a recommendation on what type of an ordinance perhaps would withstand judicial scrutiny. If that is the route that the council wants us to go, we can certainly draft that type of ordinance. We do, again, have concern that if this is unequally enforced.
No, I don't want it to be unequally enforced. And you're looking at a councilman right now who years ago in the 90s said that I didn't feel firefighters or any other charity should be out in the middle of the damn street soliciting. So I am perfectly consistent on this and feel comfortable with it. And you've done a tremendous amount of research on this, and I appreciate it. But I think we're making it kind of difficult. Also, when we start saying we're going to do some empirical information on whether we've already had a problem with somebody on a median getting hurt or whatever, and we have no documentation. You know, this council, this legislative body, just like many others, we take preemptive action quite often, knowing that something's going to happen. We have a responsibility to do that. It gives me no heartburn at all to look at empirics and see, well, nobody's been killed yet who is standing on a median. They're going to. And that's just common sense. So, you know, that would be my feeling on it. I know that I've talked to a number of you about it, and most all of us feel much the same. We might have some disagreement on how we're going to enforce it, if we're going to use soft enforcement, social workers at first, or whatever. But I think we need to get that done. The last sentence, staff is recommending that Section 28-169 be amended to prohibit a person remaining upon a street and median and obstructing traffic. And I'd move that you bring that forward, and also that we receive and file this.
Seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Continued discussion. Councilmember Euler.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Well, I've already done my once a night getting worked up, so I'll try and be brief on this one. I agree with absolutely everything Councilman Graham just said. I'd also like to add to that, I think that, you know, the signs also are a good idea and helpful, but I have some concerns still about how it's worded, because I can see that being interpreted as sending people right into the middle of the street. I can't do it in the median, but I can do it in the street. And that's what we're seeing more and more of now, is they're swarming the middle of the street in the intersection. And I've seen even a few places where it's been 4, 6, 8 people all together in a group hitting every car on War Memorial in the middle of the street. So I think there's some more wording that needs to be evaluated there, and also considering if there's any way to potentially direct people not to a specific agency, but to the number that they can call if they want to make contribution to the effort. Thank you.
Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support Councilman Grabb's motion and the recommendation to amend our traffic obstruction ordinance, but I also think we should do some more things that are mentioned in your memo. I would support it. I think that we should do an aggressive panhandling ordinance. I've witnessed aggressive panhandling at least a half a dozen times, in a spot near our neighborhood. So I think we should do that. And I also would like us to do an ordinance similar to what's being proposed in the state. I know that's probably not going to get out of committee, but I do think we could put limitations on the number of persons panhandling, and maybe you disagree, but I'd like to explore that, because, when I just go out and run errands during the day, I see groups of people panhandling, in my normal route of different places I go throughout the city at 4 or 5 different locations on a daily basis. And it's usually more than one person. It's usually at least 2, sometimes 3 or 4. So if there's a way to narrowly tailor that ordinance, I think it's a compelling government interest, and it should could be upheld. I think it's worth exploring, and I would support doing that. And some of these other things about prohibiting people from blocking the path of a person who might be solicited along a sidewalk or street, coming within 3 feet of a person, and doing any of the aggressive statement, gestures, or communications. So I would like us to see us do that further. And I also would like, because this is going to take some time to get adopted and be in effect, I know that the staff has been directed in the police department to enforce what they can right now, asking people to move on. I believe there are some state statutes that deal with obstruction of traffic and streets, and the police right now should be able to enforce those statutes by issuing tickets, traffic tickets, or I guess violations of the criminal code. Because this is a big problem, and I'd like to see us get it under control and do something a lot more than what we're doing. Thank you.
Welcome. Councilmember Rodrigo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Corporation Counsel, for your quick work on this. When I brought this forward, I knew it was a heavy lift with everything else that you have going on, and I think you brought back not only great information, but actually some good starts of some solutions. I would echo exactly what Councilman Grab said on being able to bring back a change to this. What I'd like to be able to maybe add into the full package is I appreciate the signs. I think they're important. I would go I would go more rather than less. I would find we know where the intersections are, where they're operating, and I would not try to sit here and figure out, well, are they 20 miles an hour versus 25 miles an hour? I think right now we've got a situation that let's get ahead of this, and we can always take some down if we need to. But also, too, I think we need to use, and we've got a great relationship with our social agencies, and we work well together. We need to communicate to them to help us get the message out that panhandling is not going to be allowed in the streets, so that we get ahead of them actually going into the street, and then we have a problem as well. Let's get that communication out. Our social agencies, we work really well together. We do a lot for them. They do a lot for us. This is one more thing that I think that we can work well on. The aggressive panhandling, we've got to have an ordinance. We can sit and kind of go through and try to find the data, and I appreciate that, because I think that sometimes we've got to start there. But after I brought this up on our last meeting, and I told you this, that the next day I got a call from somebody who is having to run red lights because she is afraid of the people pounding on her windshield. And so she's having to take actions which are against the driving, and trust me, she's got a great driving record. But she's having to make that choice, and that is a choice somebody shouldn't have to make. I got a call the next day from somebody who wanted to tell me about that she was the third car at an intersection where somebody stopped in a green to be able to hand money out, and a car slammed in the back of that car, and she barely missed it being the third car in an accident. And we can say, well, they shouldn't stop. There's rules of the road that they need to follow. But the problem is, as soon as that happened, the panhandler ran away. And it might be in the report. People aren't reporting everything that's happening, and it's the near misses that are going to cause some problems. On that one, we had individuals out of wrecked cars who were then getting out of busy intersections on War Memorial Drive, which also could create a problem. I agree with Councilman Gray. We don't need to wait for somebody to get injured. If we did that, we probably wouldn't have the rules and regulations that we do. We need to protect the health and safety of all of our people. With that, too, I would encourage that we educate our public that it does not do us good as a community. There are many ways. We have great organizations. If they want to be able to be part of the solution, we've got volunteer efforts. We've got organizations that are being able to put money into the right ways to be able to help our community. Encouraging the panhandling is not one of those. and I think that we can do a citywide education program on that as well. Thank you also for keeping this on the positive, because I know that there are certain limitations that we have to work within, and the city is not trying to limit free speech. I think we all know what real free speech is. What we're trying to do is make sure the conditions are right for all those who use them properly and in the vehicles or bikes or however they were intended to. But we want to keep the safety and health of our citizens top of mind. Thank you.
Welcome. Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to warn the council that I think I'll be bringing a couple of ideas at the next meeting on this topic. I need to kind of check them out as far as legality, et cetera, et cetera. They don't involve firearms, so you don't have to worry about that. I would like to say, though, that over the weekend I noticed that there is a councilman here who is a panhandler magnet. Councilman Euler and his spouse and myself and my spouse, we were walking out of the symphony, and the panhandler had a choice of 4 people to go after, and he went after Councilman Euler. Somehow we need to incorporate Councilman Euler into the ordinance. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. The motion is to direct council to amend section 28 through 169 to prohibit a person remaining upon a street and medium and obstructing traffic, and to receive and file the discussion. It's been moved and seconded. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your work, council. Madam Clerk?
We are at unfinished business. 22-105 is a communication with a request to concur with recommendation from staff with no recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission to adopt an ordinance amending existing special use ordinance number 9126 as amended in a Class R3 single-family residential district for church facilities to rebuild the sanctuary building and new bell tower for the property located at 10811 North Knoxville Avenue. And on your desk, there are 2 handouts, a revised communication and a revised ordinance.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The staff had the opportunity to work with Councilman Sear and St. Jude Church and the Diocese of Peoria, and we did reach some agreement on the sidewalk issue and the conditions. So staff would recommend the approval of the request with the following conditions and waivers. 1, that a landscape plan be provided in compliance with the Unified Development Code prior to issuance of a building permit. 2, that St. Jude construct a 5-foot wide sidewalk within the right-of-way of Wilhelm Road, including a sidewalk ramp, pedestrian button, and pedestal at Knoxville and Wilhelm. The city will complete the sidewalk in front of Prairie View Church when funding becomes available. There will be no need for the 10-foot wide shared use path along Knoxville Avenue. There would be a waiver to increase the sanctuary's maximum building height from 35 feet to 58 feet, measured to include the cross at the ridge of the roof. And lastly, that the waiver increase the bell tower's maximum height from 14 feet to 73 feet, measured to include the cross at the top.
Okay. Councilman Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move to approve item number 22-105 as outlined by City Manager.
Seconded by Councilman Ruckriegel. Any other discussion? Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to thank Councilman Sear for his work on this and taking many of us out to see exactly the lay of the land and getting a better understanding for the situation and why a compromise was so important. One thing that I would just encourage us to keep in mind as a council, though, is that precedent matters. And the reason I understand that the Knoxville multi-use shared use path is being waived is because of the precedent of the Northminster property across the street. And I just get a little, I'm going to support this. Don't get nervous, but I think it's important for us that we adopted this bicycle plan in 2015 and the thoroughfare plan 5 years later. So we need to make sure that that stays on our radar, because that is an important link, I think, in the overall connectivity of what we're trying to accomplish. So let's just be aware of the precedents we set, and let's make sure that when we make exceptions that we've got a plan to correct it at some time, because the last thing we want to do is end up with a great connection of multi-use facilities with gaps in it. So I would just tell us that, when we put the CIP together, let's make sure that these things are considered. I'm not saying it needs to be this year or next year, but that needs to stay on the radar. That would be my request of my colleagues. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
22-116 is a communication with a request to approve the site application for a Class I Assembly Hall Stadium liquor license with the retail sale of alcohol at the Exposition Gardens, Inc., doing business as Expo Gardens, 1601 West Northmore Road, with a recommendation from the Liquor Commission to approve.
Mr. Manager?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to maybe ask Councilman Allen to talk about the issue.
Sure. Councilman Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since our deferment on this topic, a lot of due diligence has been conducted over the last couple weeks, and I appreciate the various stakeholders that I've connected with on this matter, including members of the Executive Board of Expo Gardens, Councilman Sear, Councilman Renenbach as well, too. Also, some of the neighboring homeowner associations in the area, including Rolling Acres, Northmore Estates, and Richwoods Knolls. And I feel really good about the motion that I'm getting ready to make, because I think it is a combination of the concerns that were met, and then also factor in some of the precedents, as Councilman Renenbach talked about in his previous comments on the last item, is some of the precedents has been set in this space. And so we do want to be consistent when we can. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to approve Expo Gardens' application for a Class 1 liquor license to reflect the following: sale of alcohol on the inside of their venue until 1 a.m., sale of alcohol outside of their venue until 11 p.m., and sale of alcohol outside until 1 a.m. only during the Heart of Illinois Fair.
Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Councilmember Sear. Any other discussion? Bear with me a minute. Clear the tally. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Is there any other unfinished business? Madam Clerk?
We are at new business.
I'm going to ask for starters if the city manager would give us an update on the Ameren rate increase.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wish I had better news to share with everyone than I do. On April 14th, the regional electricity supply auction was held for the 11 states here in the central part of the country. The last auction that was held, the cost was $5 per megawatt hour that was actually established for the price and supply of electricity. This most recent auction came in, and that price was at $236 per megawatt. So suffice it to say, that's not meaning that our electricity bills will be going up by 4,000%, but but it is going to go up considerably. Ameren has made some analysis that they're estimating that it could be as high as $500 additional per year for residential customers. We at the city have a municipal aggregation program in place where 85% of our residents and small commercial customers are on our program. And so we buy on their behalf. And over the last 18 months, we've had a really good contract. That price has generated significant savings off of Ameren's price to compare that you could buy if you just have a contract with Ameren. However, our contract is coming to a close at the end of May as well, so we're in that same boat where we're going to have to be looking to procure electricity in this very volatile market. In fact, it's so volatile that the suppliers that we normally work with over the last 2 months over the last two cycles that we look at purchasing with, won't give us a price yet. They're still working on trying to see where the kind of dust settles on where the market is right now. So we'll know more as time goes on. We're not alone in this. We are part of a very large buying group that purchases over 400 megawatts of electricity a day. So that includes the cities of East Peoria, Peoria Heights, West Peoria, Bartonville. They're all part of this buying collective that we're with and partner with us, as well as the county of Peoria, Tazewell County, the village of Morton. There are a number of communities in Ameren's area that are part of our buying group, and we're all in that same boat where we're looking at what the market is currently doing. Our efforts, we're hopeful that we'll be able to work something out in the next 10 to 14 days that then we can report back to the community and say what those rates might look like. But we just want people to plan ahead and be thinking ahead that as summer hits, the cost of electricity is definitely going up.
Okay, thank you, Manager. Other new business, Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to inform the council that the discussion that was proposed at the last meeting concerning landlord fees, rental fees, et cetera, we ended up having a meeting a week ago yesterday. Councilwoman Jensen and Councilwoman Jackson were in attendance, plus others. We had, and Director Doolin was there as well. I think we accomplished quite a bit. We're going to be having another meeting later this week, going over some of the stuff that was on the agenda and some new items as well. But I just wanted to report that I think we're making some real progress. Hopefully we'll have something perhaps a little different, but something actionable for the council to have a look at, maybe at the next meeting, maybe beyond that. I don't know. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to give a shout out to one of our Peoria Public School students. Her name is, who was selected for first place in a writing contest dealing with the Holocaust. And the group that sort of sponsored this is Yom HaShoah, Remembering the Victims of the Holocaust. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But the first placed winner was an 8th grader from Roosevelt Magnet School, Nyhaven Stringer, and second place was Joseph Lopko from Blessed Sacrament. Third place was Ella Krull from St. Patrick's School. So I just want to say congratulations to all of the students, and our student from Roosevelt was able to get a $200 award, and under the guidance of the ELA instructor, Sarah Lynn, she did a phenomenal job and is on her way to the International Baccalaureate program at Richwoods High School. So I just want to say thank you, Nyhaven, for working hard, and this is just a Another example of many students who do very well under very trying circumstances. So just a shout out to Nyhaven, keep up the good work, and she's been a wonderful example for so many others. So go Nyhaven.
That's great. Thank you. Councilmember Regenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to offer a quick report back to the council from the last Citizens Advisory Group, the CAG group that IDOT has put together on the Knoxville corridor project. Councilman Graham and I have been attending these meetings, and at the last meeting, the proposals of an overpass or a split level intersection have been rejected by the CAG, and IDOT is moving on to grade level traditional intersection options. The work is far from over. We're still talking to a group of civil engineers who love their highways, but I feel very much better reporting to you than I did last time, and the concerns with the character of the neighborhood are coming through loud and clear to our friends at IDOT, and I have to give them recognition for hearing that clearly, because they backed off. So we're very pleased to report that. And a second thing, this is maybe a little less significant in the grand scheme of things, but for those of us that work downtown, there's no food carts. And a lot of people are coming back downtown. I know some of the larger employers aren't 100% back yet, but we considered a lot of reductions in fees during COVID to help support our businesses. And I would like Corporation Counsel and the manager to work, and I would think the health department would have to be involved, but what would happen if we cut those registration fees for the food carts in half, or that's just a number I'm throwing out, but let's see how we could help those small business owners get back on their feet, and if that would be a possibility. So we'll be happy to look at that. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks. Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just 2 quick points. First, shout out to our Community Development Department for the Great American Cleanup this past Saturday. It was my first time participating in that event as a councilman, and I had opportunity to go to existing neighborhoods in my district, but then also I got to go to some of the new territories I'll be inheriting. I was in your neck of the woods of Lyndhurst and got a chance to interact with those constituents, and that was just a great display of just people taking pride in their neighborhoods throughout our great city. So thank you to Community Development for that. And then also a friendly reminder to our constituents that the new maps do go into place May 1st. And so, as we're in this period of transition, you may still, out of habit, contact your former councilman or council member, and we will continue to work with you. Me and Councilman Greb, we attended Metro West Neighborhood Association meeting this past Saturday, and they're currently mine, but they'll be his next week. But as we let them know, is at the end of the day, we work for the city, and so I just wanted to throw that friendly reminder out there that you may contact your former representative, but I think that's I could probably echo the sentiments of everyone around this horseshoe. We'll still work with you. We may refer you to the right person, but at the end of the day, you'll still be served by members of this horseshoe. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks. Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple items. The first one for City Manager. Last meeting, I mentioned something about transparency for our stormwater fees and coming up with some type of system where our constituent would be able to know where the monies go, what's the relationship between the CIP plan and the stormwater fees. So people are just asking, okay, what projects are being done, where's the money going, how does it relate to CIP, and if there's money left or we're short on money. I think people are asking for more transparency, and it'd be great. I don't know if you remember me asking that, and I forgot to mention today in our meeting with Director Crady. But maybe we could come up with a plan where we can be more transparent, and every time there's a report on our finance, so people would know that, okay, here's where that money, here's how much we collected, here's how much money we spent, here's the project we're working on. So I'm hoping we can come up with something that we can report to our constituent pretty soon, so we can just be transparent about that. Thank you very much. The other thing, I hate to mention names because I always forget somebody, but
something very important has happened in the fifth district. The fire department, Engine 15, will be upgrading their medical service to the 5th District. We're going to go from basic life service, BLS, to ALS. There's going to be a press release this coming Monday morning. I think it's great news. I've been working on this for the last 4 years, but I got to give credit to a lot of people. Number one, our ex-chief, Chief Bachman, started the process with the grant, and existing chief, Sean, thank you. Mr. Solberger finished the projects. I'm really excited that finally, 4 years later, Station 15 and 20 in the 5th District both will have services at the ALS level, which is very, very important for everybody. I want to thank Dr. Jackson, was part of the project. I want to thank Andrew Rand from AMT that was part of this project. And I'm sure there's other people I'm probably missing here, but it was great teamwork, and we finally got it done after 4 years, and I think it's great news for the people in the 5th District. So thank you for all these people. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Welcome. Any other new business? Madam Clerk?
We are at citizens' opportunity to address the City Council and Town Board. I have not received any cards.
Okay, let's keep going.
And so we would be at adjourned to executive session for the City Council and the Town Board, and the Town Board is asking to go into executive session pursuant to 2C1, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity, and 2C11, litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting. And then for the city?
City, yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The City Council will be going into closed session pursuant to 2C1 as just recited by the Town Clerk, as well as 2C11 as just recited by the Town Clerk, and 2C21 to discuss closed session minutes.
And I need a motion to adjourn and go into close. Councilmember Ruckriegel, seconded by Councilmember Seer. Please cast your ballots. Thank you for your service.